I'm going to record this message, so welcome. I'm Renee Hobbs, and here we are for the first meeting of the Task Force on Critical Media Literacy. I am really grateful that you have agreed to serve as members of the task force. And you can see from the chart that our charge is to advise Ncte on how they can strategically contribute to critical media literacy education in the current landscape. I thought it would be fun to play the Who's Here game in a slightly non-traditional visual way. So please now illustrate this slide with an image or an icon or a symbol or a letter or a word or something that introduces yourself. So you're finding your way to that page and you're adding some content, right? I am a total arrow. So I'll put myself down here as an arrow. I get straight to the point. I just modeled the task. So let me see if you have any questions or can get started on that. Hey, Emily.
Hello.
Nice to see you, Emily. We're illustrating our Who's Here slide, but maybe while we do that, you will talk through your welcome and greetings to us.
Thank you so much, Renee. It's wonderful to be with all of you. Thank you for making a commitment to this task force and the purposes within the charge. We're very grateful to have your expertise and your energy joining us. When we first approached Renee with the big ask of will you chair this group, she and I shared a long conversation that was fruitful. And one of her first questions was, is this a group that can really make change? And is this an opportunity to really create meaningful work? The answers to both are an emphatic yes. Ncte is approaching this work with great interest, with commitment, having heard from a growing number of our members that this is indeed work that should and must be taken on to meet the needs of society, of students, and of the urgent expertise needed of teachers today. So I have pledged to Renee a depth of commitment that I will stay personally involved, that Lisa Avetizian on this call, very close colleague, will be tracking this work, will have a depth of commitment as well, and that this group in totality, with what's developed, again, guided by Renee's leadership, will indeed have lasting impact within the National Council of Teachers of English. So I'm so pleased that you're kicking things off today, and we have, great opportunity and certainly a beckoning call to answer towards this work. So again, thank you for your commitment, and know that your time and your expertise will be met with a depth of interest and commitment from the organization. And we will also be reporting regularly to the presidential team, and as frequently as the executive committee meets, we will also be updating them on this work. So thank you again for joining, and congratulations. This is a place where you can make a meaningful difference. We appreciate you.
Wonderful.
Renee?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Emily. And we are glad that you and Lisa are both here. I know your schedule is crowded, and so you may not be here for our whole meeting, but I wanted to overview what we're going to try to accomplish in just the next 60 minutes. We're going to take a look at that overview document and kind of review the kind of fast and furious pace we have for the next 4 months. We're going to share with you some of the themes that emerged from the 5-question survey that each of the task force members completed, and thank you for that. Then we're going to spend a chunk of time working in small groups where we talk a little bit and get to know each other and start to understand successes in the domain of critical media literacy and English language arts, successes, challenges, and opportunities. And then we're going to preview what we're going to do for the next meeting, and we'll set our meeting date for late July. But let me go back to the slide with our introductions, and if I can ask, being that I am a word girl, will ask you to introduce yourself by deconstructing and analyzing the image you chose to represent yourself. I'll go first. I already told you mine. I'm Renee Hobbs. I like to, I'm a arrow. So I'm on the compass points game. I'm a true north. I'm task oriented. I like to get stuff done. And so I chose the gray arrow. Who's next?
I'll go.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. It's Tom Lynch. And I chose the GIF of the Matrix language, I think in part because as I've been reflecting on the work of the committee and sort of, some ways to approach it, one of the things that I would love to introduce to the conversations too, and is around like the nature of programming languages and the fact that they actually comprise a lot of the media platforms and tools that we use. And I'm curious as to whether, the thinking critically about the languages beneath the screen have a role in some of the work that we're doing here as a task force, in addition to the applications and the things that we do above the screen.
Wonderful. Thanks, Tom. Who's next?
I'm happy to go next.
Thanks.
Hi, this is Annie Del Principe. Nice to see you all. Tom, that was super interesting to think about. Mine is, I'm less literacy oriented and just more like personality oriented. I put in the photo of myself. This is from just a couple of days ago, leaping off a bridge. I'm out in Cape Cod. I live in New York City, but my family and I came out here for a chunk of the summer to try to be in a less COVID stress location. So I guess to relate it to our work though, I'd like us to take risks in terms of like how we're defining critical media literacy, right? And be expansive in our sense of that. So that was my risk, leaping off a bridge, high tide.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing. Who's next?
I can go next. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sarah.
No, I'm sorry. This is Deetra. I'm on the phone now
sorry,
because I'm about to hop. Sorry.
Go for it.
Call. Apologize for being late. I just ended our virtual gathering, so just had a little bit of transition time there. I would probably have a blurred screen because that's what I feel recently. Like I'm all emotional a lot and not getting a chance to kind of sit and process. So I'll just add that right now. But I look forward to the conversation and learning and thinking with all of you.
We're glad you're here. Thanks so much. Who's next?
Thank you.
Hey, I'll go real quick. So I'm in the top right corner, Seth. I am a graduate, little emoji, because I am actually going to defend my dissertation, which is broadly on critical media literacy next Wednesday. So I'm coming from a pretty fresh perspective of a few studies that I did in both a pre-service teacher and high school media literacy context, working with essentially implementing critical media literacy with pre-service teachers and high school students. So,
Who's next? Thanks.
I'll go next. I'm bottom right down there. So first of all, I just looked quickly for an image, so didn't put a lot of thought into it. But that's a photo. It's a selfie. I put a camera on a tripod and set a light next to a class of mine. So that's me with some students. And I think, I guess that's a metaphor that what we do is really about empowering students and love, really, like I care for them and I want them to care for the world. So that's what drives a lot of what I do.
Chris Sloan, thank you so much for sharing. Who's next?
You bet.
I can go next. I'm in the upper left-hand corner, I guess. I channeled my pop culture imagery, kind of similar to Chris. I just found an image and I put it in there. my family and I are avid Funko Pop collectors. So if you go to Funko Pop and you can design your own selfie, basically, if you were a pop. If I were to like metaphorically channel this, I work in a school district in Central Illinois, very rural, very, very conservative. I am really the only teacher, the only individually constructed teacher that takes on such a task. And I've been very passionate about it over the past couple of years to really transform my own teaching practices as I work with students. But a little personal woven in of my vices of collecting Funko Pops in there too.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. Who's next?
I can go next. My name is Ryan Scannell. I am Lady Rhetoric down in the bottom in the center. I study rhetoric. I love rhetoric. I think rhetoric has useful things to tell us about critical media literacy, so that's why I went with her.
Very nice. Thanks so much for sharing. Who's next?
I'll go next, Renee. This is Amy Straniolo. I put a small image of some data visualizations that some of the students that I work with have done. And it's a really interesting kind of representation of some of the recent new direction that some of my work has taken around thinking about the role of data in critical media literacy. And I thought that might be relevant.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Who's next?
Hi,
I'll go next.
Oh, please go ahead.
Okay, I'm Mary Crystal, and I was not nimble enough to get a really swell image on the screen, but I think the absence of the image is a good metaphor that right now I'm working in the background, helping classroom teachers. I was a high school media literacy teacher, and now I've been informally mentoring teachers who are in the trenches trying to find better ways to integrate media literacy in their classroom.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing. Who's next?
Hi, my name is Noah Golden, and I'm a teacher educator at Cal State Long Beach in Southern California. I apologize, I didn't add an image, but I want to extend my thanks to whoever put the image of the group of people in the bottom right corner, because I think that what I try to keep as a guiding force in my work is how our practices, policies, and ways we're engaging in analysis and critique impact people's lived realities on a daily basis. And so I really appreciate whoever put that image up there for keeping that as our focus.
Very nice. Now I'd like Lisa and Salome to introduce yourselves. Lisa,
Thank you.
Oh, Salome, you go first.
Oh, sorry about that. So thank you, Renee, for giving me an opportunity to be here. My name is Salome Abkhazishvili. I come from country of Georgia. I was an international graduate student in Indiana, and now I'm doing my internship at Media Education Lab. And my decision to choose this manuscript visual is coming from my role today, because my responsibility and duty for today's meeting is just to be a careful listener and take notes and help Renee to summarize this meeting for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa Avatisian. I am Senior Liaison in the Executive Director's Office, so Emily's office, who joined us at the top of the hour at Ncte. And I work with a lot of our governance groups, many assignments in the Executive Director's Office, and often work with task forces like these. So
nice. So you can see that I went from the agenda to the document that I think you have already reviewed. This was a kind of a plan of attack that Lisa and Emily and I kind of constructed back when we were in our initial planning. I think the really important thing for us to realize is our job is really to give recommendations to Ncte leadership, right? That's really what we're doing. We're trying to give practical action steps and strategic guidance that help NCTE bring critical media literacy more fully to their many members. Because it is the summer and because we want to use your time well, we're imagining just 4 meetings from July to November, but with work to be done in between. And you guys already did this first step, right? You already answered some questions, and today we're going to review some of the data that you shared. You'll see all the many things we already believe and hold true. It's fascinating. We will discover what we all generally think, and then we'll press on. One of the reasons why for the second meeting, we wanted to ask you to interview a informant or NCTE stakeholders is because we think it's really important for us to decenter ourselves as true believers, because in fact, the problem is really the gap between the media literacy true believers and the general NCTE membership. The general NCTE membership hasn't taken up media literacy practice. And just to tell a short story about that, of course, some of you might have been at that meeting we had in November, where there was a room full of us true believers, each one sitting at a table of 8 to 10 chairs, and there was nobody except the true believers. We were in a giant room that could have sat 300 people, and there were 14 of us, each of us sitting at our individual round tables. It was super sad because it was such a great group of people, so much insight to share, but no audience. So that's why we need to decenter ourselves as true believers and to figure out what the members understand and how we bring them closer to where our goals are. So we'll ask you to reach out to one informant, gather information from them. We'll share that material. We'll have another meeting in late July where we start to get our creative juices flowing. Right? We're going to brainstorm tons of ideas. At the third meeting, we're going to take a look at the literature. Of course, the literature on this topic is vast and wide, and a number of other groups have already prepared high-level stakeholder-type reports. We are not reinventing that wheel, right? But we will do a careful read and annotation of the ideas that are most important from those documents. We'll use that to leverage the recommendations that we are going to be developing and have that draft ready for September. You can see the names and contact information of the members here. I think most everybody is here. And if you stumble across, or want to share a resource that you think will be important for the members as we move through the next 4 months, please feel to do that on our curated collection of media literacy reports. We're using a digital tool called Wakelet to do that. And you can just click on the link and go there. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the process that we'll be using over the next 4 months?
Well, I'd love to ask a question, if I may, Renee. So when we talked about Emily's words earlier about this group being able to really have an impact, I'm curious if we could think through that impact, because I want to share that a frustration that I feel like with policy statements, with the sorts of work we often do at NCTE, we see a document as a finishing point. Yeah. And there's a lot of hard work and really great work that often goes into documents. And then we post them somewhere and they kind of disappear into a vault. And I agree with you, many members of our 1,000-strong organization don't see these documents. They aren't used unless people actively search for them. So I'm wondering if we could take a moment to think through because I love what you said, like how do we share work and engage in dialogue and kind of make this work more the norm? But how can we get beyond just, creating a document that ends up somewhere and not being used?
Yeah, I'm so glad you're underlining that point, Noah, because that was almost my first question to Emily when we started, was like, if this is just another document to plop into the nowhere land, I'm not interested at all. And in fact, as we move through this series of conversations, we're going to be alert to the action items that are really and truly actions, right? And that may involve partnerships, right? That may involve year-long sequences of events. That may involve online communities. That may involve the creation of more documents, right? Of course. But I'm really glad you're underlining that our job is not just to produce the recommendations and walk away. Our job is to produce action items that we hopefully will be personally invested enough in that we might want to continue our collaboration after this first planning phase is over. But this will depend on our imagination and creativity and our willingness to think out of the box. And so that's kind of why we wanted to use today's meeting to get on the same page and then kind of get out of the box by recognizing where our own biases are, where our own domains of interest are. And so let's turn to the themes that we identified in the task force. You may choose to open this up and annotate it as we go through it. What we did was we looked at the data that you submitted on the type form. It was just 4 questions, remember? And we looked for people who said similar things. And boy, did we find it. So I'm just going to review. You can put your thumb up and agree with these themes. You can disagree with these things. You can quibble these things. As we look through these things, these represent statements and ideas that we generally all agree with, right? So the first one is obvious. NCTE members have a limited understanding of critical media literacy. You can see many, many statements there from the survey data that shows that most of us don't think that the NCTE members have a good understanding of critical media literacy at all. Then another theme that we identified was that this group thinks that critical media literacy focuses on student voice and agency. And boy, there's lots of really beautiful prose reflecting that foundational belief. Another core belief of this group is that critical media literacy includes analyzing and creating media, right? And so there's lots of good language there that explores that in different ways. And there's a theme that critical media literacy includes a focus on participation and civic engagement. There's a big interest in recognizing that critical media literacy includes examination of power, knowledge, issues. And lots of nice prose, thoughtful prose about that. Next, this group believes that educators are stuck in comfortable paradigms and the routines of status quo schooling. Yeah. This group believes that NCTE members are stuck in comfortable paradigms and the routines of status quo schooling, and that they lack access to principles, procedures, standards, and resources, right? Including pedagogical resources and other resources. Some noted the gap between the research and practice. A big theme has to do with the perception. This group has a perception that educators, NCTE members at large, have a fear of engaging with issues of power, knowledge, relevance, empathy, and popular culture. So these are some of the themes that guide us. And before we break into small groups, I invite you to review maybe just 1 or 2 of those themes that interest you, and maybe talk about which one of these themes is relevant, important, is something we need to think more deeply about. Maybe all of these ideas aren't equally important. Which ones jump out as absolutely important from your point of view?
Well, I'll say that just from sort of basic jumping off point, I think definitions of what critical media literacy are, especially given how many different people are making arguments about it in the literature. It's probably useful for us to think about in terms of both organizing ourselves and organizing recommendations and actions and things like that.
Great point. All those different flavors. There are quite a lot of flavors, and they keep morphing and changing as media and technology change too. Thanks for sharing. What else jumps out for you? These are the places where we tend to agree. What's most important to you? What's missing? Which ideas do you want to underline as important for our group to be thinking about as we move forward?
Hi, it's Tom Lynch. I think the one that stands out on the list that's, I think, very important to me is the centering of civic mindedness or civic engagement and what that means. And I think one that's missing, which I kind of foreshadowed before a bit, is just this idea of what role computational languages play in this as well. And that's just like a big term I just used to mean the algorithms that are involved in some of the tools that we use, some of the privacy and data practices, the way in which interfaces are designed by some people, but maybe not with other people in mind. So I think that the criticality that we're talking about, I think, extends beyond just the app and the texts that are used by the app to produce. I also think there's an awful lot beneath the screen as well that I'd love to explore further.
Thanks for sharing. In my recent article in Reading Research Quarterly, I make an argument about the absence of focusing on genres, persuasive genres and algorithms of choice in English language arts. We are definitely not seeing much confidence in teachers being able to teach about personalized search, personalized entertainment, or personalized persuasion. So I'm kind of with you on that. Other key ideas that are you want to comment on, reflect on, underline as important to for us to think forward as we move forward.
I mean, to me, it's about student voice and media production, and that's what I teach, so it's near and dear to my heart. But just one of the things I realized during our recent COVID hybrid model was I used to be more fixated on students using the tools that I had in my classroom and the space where we were. And I realized through this last round that they need experience creating with the tools that they already have to try to bring about that change in their world, no matter what that change might be. And it doesn't have to be, major world altering change, but just for them to see themselves as advocate. And I think a lot of it is media creation that brings them to that point, that gives them that power.
Great point. We sometimes make activities that revolve around the tools we have, but they have got tools in their pocket, and we can design around students' independent use of those too. That's a great point, Chris. Thanks for sharing.
And I would just have to add that obviously equity is a big part of things. So I don't mean to imply that everybody's got the tools they need, but I was surprised with how they figured out with some of the what I would consider rudimentary or problematic tools. Like I thought they were going to have some difficulty, and actually they did pretty well. Nice,
thanks for sharing. Other key points that you want to underline or omissions that you notice? The purpose of this activity was for us to discover what we have in common or what core beliefs we share. So I want you to identify which of these you think matters most to you and why it does.
So this is Ryan again. I'll jump in one more time. I think the theme of educators being stuck in comfortable paradigms and routines of status quo schooling is a really interesting one, in particular because several articles that I've read lately sort of take on the idea that reading well is going to solve our media literacy problems, when in fact reading well may be a hindrance, that we need, in some cases, we need better methods that don't necessarily align with what we as English educators believe is our great skill. So I think that that's complicated and confusing and nevertheless interesting and exciting.
Thanks for sharing. Okay, so I think you have, I would invite you, let's just put it this way. So right now, these shared beliefs could be nuanced into some lovely paragraphs. But it would be better if you would feel comfortable annotating along the side ideas that are especially meaningful to you, or ideas that are not here in this document but should be, and you have identified 5 or 6 of those ideas already. I invite you to annotate this document so that we can make sure to get some of your good ideas down and logged. What we want to do now is we want to turn to this challenge of the small group breakouts. We'd like to break you into 3 groups of 3 or 4 people to discuss 3 questions. And you only have about 15 minutes, so this is really a preliminary discussion. We want to try to figure out from you what have been the most successful implementation of critical media literacy education that you're familiar with, and what were the key ingredients of its success, and what helped it to thrive. Recognizing that we are thinking of English language arts in the K through 20 context, but your examples and all may go beyond that, right? So we'd also like you and your team members to address this question about challenges. Why doesn't every English teacher use critical literacy pedagogies to help students analyze media, technology, and popular culture? Why doesn't every student create media to represent their knowledge and understanding? What could be changed to make this a reality? Why doesn't every pre-service English teacher learn to implement media literacy pedagogies? What could be changed to make this a reality? And then finally, your third question, what actions and opportunities strike you right now at the very beginning of our journey, right? If you've got some ideas for that, pop them in the slide group. We're going to break into 3 groups, and I'm going to assign you to be a member of the red team, the green team, or the blue team. Give me a thumbs up if you see how the slides are color coded, so that you'll know if you're a member of the red team, the green team, or the blue team. Okay, so now it's small group breakout time. Basically 3 groups, 12 people. Breakout rooms are created. Amy, Ann, Ryan, and Seth, you guys are the red team. Mary, Noah, Salome, and Sarah, you guys are the green team. And Deidre, Chris, Lisa, and Tom, you are the blue team. Thumbs up if you understand the task and how you're going to converse together for the next 12 minutes. Okay, breakout rooms are open. Click on the link in the breakout room and, start talking.
Too teacherly.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay. What is the most successful implementation of critical media literacy education that you are familiar with? What are the key ingredients of its success, and what helped it to thrive?
I'll start. I mean, I guess I've seen a lot of tools and protocols through the years. The one that I recently came across, I went to a workshop by Mike Caulfield, who has the Sift Protocol, which I wasn't familiar with before, but what I really like about it is the first thing, the S. Are you all familiar with this one?
No.
Okay. So Mike Caulfield, I think he's at Oregon State or somewhere on the West Coast. He has a thing called the Sift Protocol. And what I like is the S stands for stop. And I teach high school students, and I think, and I guess this is true of everybody, but I see it with high school students a lot, is the first thing they do is act, like tweet, retweet, post, and I just like the idea. The rest of it is good stuff too, and his materials all make sense. But that idea of stopping before you interact with media is something that I just wish we could teach more of to more people.
That's great.
But the rest of the protocol is pretty interesting. But I'll leave it at that for now.
I'll share a success story because I'm in the teacher education business, right? And when COVID happened, we immediately kind of recognized that everybody's life was disrupted. And so we created a daily hangout, a place for people, an open space, an open online Zoom meeting for people to gather. And in the first days and weeks of that gathering, most of the conversation was socio-emotional. It was like, how the hell are you dealing with this? Because our world is turned upside down and we are crazy. But very quickly, as the group became to trust each other, they started spontaneously sharing things that were working, including media literacy practices and in the most interesting creative strategies. And within after like a couple of weeks, I was like, boy, I'm getting really tired of running this. So basically, they took it over, and it became member led, right? And when finally, after like 59 sessions, 12 weeks and 59 sessions, we decided to stop it because we were like, it's the end of the school year now, and we can't be doing this every day for the rest of our lives. There was a real sense that people said, when I saw you demonstrate how you did blah, 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 it gave me confidence to go try it. And I feel like the most successful teacher education media literacy initiatives I've ever been part of were always rooted deep in modeling near peer and close transfer. Not something so complicated and far away that the teacher could never in a million years have the expertise to pull that off, but near transfer, stuff that the teacher could imagine doing tomorrow, because that kind of builds like muscle strength, right? It's a small change and you get feeling better and your muscle gets stronger, and then you're willing to take a bigger change. And it seems to me that successful teacher education programs have this strong foundation of trust, and then this near transfer activities that build confidence and build capacity for innovation and risk taking.
In 15 seconds or less, I'm going to echo that with my high school students. The same thing. There were so many problems with people like, I can't figure out this. Oh, I might not be able to do that. But then there were these shining little lights every once in a while. And those people, I just gave them the time and said, how did you actually make that work? And then the level just kept going up. But it was that same thing, that peer-to-peer success. And then in the end, I mean, their stuff is pretty good, I'll say. Like, it was pretty interesting stuff. I'll drop in a link to my students' media site just as a frame of reference.
Yeah, I've definitely seen so many projects over the years that I know Ernest has done, Morel and Taro Garcia. Just like, there's a whole crew who have done some really impressive work just around what it means to bring in different kinds of non-traditional media into a school space, and then to really treat it as a text to be critically consumed and critically produced, resulting in action in the world. You know, so whether it's responding to a concern in the community, or whatever it might be. So there's something about that, like where there's an authenticity to the texts that are introduced and authorized in the classroom, and when the texts that are produced are those that are the result of genuine inquiry and care from students. There's something about that combination that I find really, really powerful.
Nice.
And I also, those consume and produce, I think, are problematic terms increasingly, but they're the ones I got.
Yeah. Should we turn to the challenges?
Sure.
Why doesn't this happen? Lisa, this is one where I would really love your feedback on. Why isn't every NCTE teacher doing this? You know the members better than anybody.
I think I'll have to think about that question. I don't know if it's, there's so much at NCTE, there's so much to be involved in, and I think it's the economy of time sometimes,
Yeah.
and the onslaught of information that maybe, and this is more of a parent's observation. Receiving information through multiple channels is sometimes important, even though it can inundate. But that does increase the opportunity to receive that information. If there's,
it creates risk.
It does. It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. This is Sonia Livingstone's research in EU, right? So yes, the more kids are spending on time, the more active, more digitally connected they are, the more they're using media, the more risk they experience, which creates for parents some ambiguity about, you know, how much media do you want to have your kid experience in school?
Right.
Thanks for sharing.
You're welcome.
I mean, I would say a lot of teachers would say they don't have time. That I've already got to do blankety blankety blank to do pass the whatever tests at the end of the year. And so to make it simple for people, like, and these are things, again, we're all the true believers, but you know how image can teach argument. But a lot of people think like, I've just got to teach argumentative writing and informational writing. And there's obviously really so many connections between media literacy and like just argument, that it would be nice if it were made a little easier or accessible for NCTE members, I would imagine, and to understand, like, I teach Brit Lit. How does this even make sense? Well, I don't know. How about racism and Othello? You know, it's seeing those connections is not always easy for people because teachers, myself included, we get overwhelmed with what just we have to do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I think that sounds right to me. I've worked with a lot of English teachers over the last few years, mostly in communities of color and poverty in the South Bronx. And, you know, if it's not helping them with the standards that they have to teach, and if it's not clearly going to support the test, they don't know what to do with it necessarily. You know, so I think that's something that in English ed circles sometimes I think we implicitly or explicitly roll our eyes at some of that. I think it's really important to honor it and to really think, like, what does it mean to make teaching critical media literacy easier than ever for a teacher, and acknowledging some of those kinds of parameters and frameworks that are simply part of their daily realities for, you know,
and the pressure, you know, the pressures of if my pay grade or my job is on the line compared to what I think my students are going to do, I'm probably going to turn to things that seem directly related to that task.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and I think there is a perception that popular culture can be risky in the classroom.
For sure.
That there can be a kind of unanticipated, the sense that teachers can control kids' interpretations.
Yeah.
They think they can control kids' interpretations of Romeo and Juliet. They can't, but they think they can, but they know they can't control their kids' interpretations of a meme, of a YouTube video, of a YouTuber, or of a film, right?
Yeah.
So that's scary.
Yeah.
Because there's some risk to student voice and student empowerment, right? Many times teachers, when I'm first starting them, like first steps in, they will come back and go, I couldn't handle it. The kids had so much to say. It was overwhelming. I couldn't manage the classroom because they had so much to say about this text. And teachers aren't really used to that. Right? So classroom management became like a new problem when we're talking about stuff that kids have funds of knowledge to actually, you know, make points about and to develop ideas. And I think that can scare teachers. That's a challenge.
Just one final note on this one before we switch to the next. It says in the prompts too, it talks about pre-service English teachers. And, you know, when it comes to English ed programs and teacher ed more broadly, you know, it's increasingly has to do with what's being required by CAPE or whatever accrediting body is in the mix. And it has to do with what is in the complementing documentation that Ncte provides, you know, around teaching an English ed program. So, you know, I think acknowledging some of those realities there and looking at, especially as we switch into opportunities, like ways to affect change, and certainly in teacher education, from what I've observed, has been like, what does it mean to get it into the standards in a way that essentially lovingly forces programs to do what's got to be done. So I don't think it's quite the same tact when thinking about K-12 educators, but I do think when we're talking about teacher ed, the accreditation, you know, the accreditation universe is a really important one to think about.
Yeah, and it's complicated by the fact that that's happening at the national level and at the state level, but in different ways,
That's right.
So,
and it varies state by state by state.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think you're right. That's going to be a big nut for us to try to unpack, crack open, or whatever. All right, what about the third question? We have only about 4 minutes left.
What actions could Ncte take to inspire English educators to make critical media literacy a priority for all learners?
Organizationally, and Renee, you alluded to this earlier, but I think this can be a lonely job for someone. You know, like if you're the only one in your building doing this. So to me, there's just these obvious connections that I'm sure have been explored by Ncte, but you know, the NCSS, the social studies people whose charge is civics education, you know, how often do we connect with our social studies people who are teaching those kinds of subjects?
Yeah.
And if there is a media specialist, how often is that person brought into the conversation just on a school level?
Yeah.
And the other thing is a bit messier that I would say, and that is, it's an ill-formed thought, but as we move to more hybrid education, like to me, it's looking more and more like probably not going to be back in the classroom in August the way things were before. And there's got to be more of a partnership with home. I think the common ground, if there's a Venn diagram of in-school learning and out-of-school learning, it seems like civics and media literacy is part as we head to the election. It's like, I don't know, that's about as far as I got, but having home and student and teacher talking about the election seems to lend itself to media literacy. That's all I got.
Nice point. My only contribution on opportunities right now is Adam ruins everything. I actually think celebrities and media personalities, just the same way that at Ncte, when there's an author event, it's like all hell breaks loose. Those ladies wait in line for hours. They get their books signed. They're so thrilled to meet the author. It's just unbelievable. There's a cultural power to that. I actually think that media literacy could be well explained by certain media personalities who English teachers would be, I don't want to say more receptive to learn from, but who might explain the ideas in a way that was sensitive to audience and context. Of course, John Stewart, Trevor Noah, John Oliver. They're already doing media literacy, right? In a lot of ways. But Adam Conover from his show, it's comedy entertainment, and it's incredibly information. It has high information value as well. So I wonder how celebrities could be part of our recruitment strategy.
Yeah. So one contribution I'll make before we head back is just, I wrote a book recently on computer science in K-12 spaces. And the main premise of the book, aside from it's important for civic reasons, not just economic, is the main premise of it is like, if you really believe computer science is important for all children to learn in some critical way, stop talking about computers and stop talking about the sciences. Meaning you have to embed it into all disciplines and core disciplines in really meaningful ways that deepen and expand what's already going on in the classroom. And I think there might be something, I don't know that there is, but there might be something to be said for critical media literacy here too. Nobody needs more to do.
Yeah.
But if this work can be framed with some opportunities that, again, that complement what's already happening, and that honor what's already happening, I think we would see greater adoption, and I think we might even see a greater quality of effect.
Yeah, well, certainly more creativity around integrating into an existing program. There's innovation there that results. That's great to be able to document.
In a few seconds that are left, Tom, I'm just gonna have to think about what you just said a little bit. So put a link to your book in the chat. How about?
Okay, so let's just take your temperature up there. That was a great discussion, thumbs up. If it was an okay discussion like this, and if it was like totally a waste of time, just. All right, so you did have a good discussion. What we'll do is we'll just identify 3 or 4 themes, maybe one interesting idea from each room, right? So let's start with the red room. What was one interesting idea that came out of that conversation?
I'll just talk about what we talked about last. And I'll speak primarily for myself so that I don't put this off on my colleagues. We think that one of the sort of central tensions of NCTE for a long, long time has been people who want to hold on to a really traditional understanding of what English and what English studies is and should be, and a sort of more progressive activist version of what English is and what English should be. And NCTE, for as long as it has existed, has tried to make space for both of those groups to work together without adjudicating that tension. And so we were sort of discussing the possibility and or desirability of taking a stand in that space and what that means for critical literacy and what it means for English more broadly.
Thanks for sharing. Can I hear one key idea from the green team, please? What's a topic that came up in your conversation that was interesting or important?
Can I nominate Noah? He had a really great idea at the end, but he ran out of time to say it, and I thought it needs to be shared.
Well, I appreciate it. So we had, I think, a great conversation that connects with what you were saying, Ryan, in terms of how this work is often, an afterthought. It's often kind of the dessert. And, the idea I was sharing was just calling attention to my friend and colleague, Deb Beeler, and I wrote a piece suggesting that NCT advocate for a national critical media literacy campaign where every section, every level starts thinking about what does this work look like in our community of practice. And I think part of the reason why this work isn't done is because our institutions aren't prioritizing it. And I include NCT in that, and teacher education, and so many aspects of our work. But I think that we all have a lot of work to do to make this work central. And that was one idea of how we as an NCT community can encourage each other to make it more central. And I like the way you framed it, Ryan, like we essentially would be adjudicating in that tension and saying that, this is work that is not on the periphery of the English language arts.
Okay, thanks for sharing. And the blue team, one big idea that came out of the blue team.
I think one thing that we heard in different ways a few times was just that that for teachers in classrooms and for those who are running teacher-ed programs, they've already got full plates. They've got a lot going on, and it's important to empathize and honor like what is already comprising so much of their curricular headspace, and then to say like how can the work we're talking about here, how can it deepen and expand what they're already doing in certain ways, and then what are ways in which it can also improve or adjust. But it's about it not coming out of from another direction and being another thing, but rather like how does this complement and complexify the work that's already going on.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, I just want to, we only have 5 minutes left. I am very much a proponent of it's my mantra. No Zoom meeting shall be longer than 1 hour. It's just generally been a really important mantra for me for the last 6 months or a year. And so I am imposing that 1 hour limit on us. From our preparations for the next meeting, we're going to engage in that important process of decentering ourselves. And I'm going to ask you to find a Ncte informant or stakeholder. That's an English teacher who's a member of the Ncte community. Lisa, if our team members are struggling with how to find someone, will you be able to assist us with the name and an email of someone who might qualify as a English teacher Ncte member?
Yes, I can help with suggestions.
Beautiful. So reach out to Lisa. You have her email if you are struggling to find somebody. Now, this is not, our goal is to decenter ourselves as true believers and better understand how this work is understood by the community and valued by the community at large, because we're bridge builders. We're trying to build bridges from where we are to where they are. And this is not research. We're not doing research. This is not contributing to generalized new knowledge. So it's not research. I just want to underline that. This is journalism, okay? So we're not going to disclose participant names or location details. We're going to write little sketches. And I just started by thinking about some of the English teachers that are kind of near and dear in my easily reachable within my community. And I generated some sample questions, but you will of course have your own way of framing questions. So please feel free to ask your own questions in any way you want. Just notate them here. And then that also is good because then that helps us steal from your questions, right? That helps us borrow some of your good questions. And after you complete your interview, write a short summary of the key insights that you gained in this space here. Give me a thumbs up if you understand the nature of that task and why it's important for us as we start to do the kind of creative work that we're going to be doing now.
Are you suggesting or recommending that we look for an informant who is sort of like in the same area of K20 as we are? So, or does it matter?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Doesn't matter. But that's a cool idea, Ryan. If you wanted to do it that way, that'd be cool. But I'm not. I don't think it has to. I don't think it has to be that. You're free to choose
whoever.
Anyone.
Okay.
Great question, Amy.
2 clarifying questions. One, should we then seek out, because I can think of a bunch of educators that I work with who are also true believers, but should I seek out someone who either I don't know or is not of the same ideological bent?
Well, I think the idea is we're trying to get outside our own bubble. With our survey question today, we realize the common assumptions we share. We don't want to, with this project, reaffirm those shared assumptions. We've got lots of great people who believe the things we believe. We're trying to understand the non-believers. We're trying to understand the ones who are teaching 12 works of classic literature and very, very happy doing so, right? The ones who are really, as far as they got was Google Docs. That was their big thing, right? So we're looking for people who are not really familiar with critical media literacy, right? And who are essentially the kind of people we want to speak to when we're trying to bring them closer to our understanding. We're trying to understand that community better and understand their needs better.
Got it. And
Great question.
In terms of the journalistic sketch, is that the extent of the reporting out we're going to do, or do we need to collect more extensive notes or like audio recorded, or you know what I mean? Like, how should we archive?
It's not research. It's a journalistic sketch. Its expectation is 1 to 3 paragraphs, right?
Got it.
So its only purpose is it's illustrative, and it's also then will inform your thinking. So when we get back together, we'll be thinking about that other person's point of view in addition to our own. So we're really, in a way, hopefully going to build some empathy here through this interview process. This project is as much for us as it is for them. They're going to learn a lot about critical media literacy just by talking to you. But what we are hoping also that you bring back the challenges and their understanding. You bring some heart to that. Okay, so then the last thing is trying to find a meeting date. And it's always one of the most difficult things to do, right? One of the most difficult things to do. I suggested in the task force meeting that we could aim and take a look at about a month from now. And I put this one down as a possibility. Can you look in your calendar and tell me, how is Tuesday, July 28th? Maybe at this same time, which would be 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. If that time works for you, will you give me a thumbs up? Tuesday, July 28th. Look on your calendar and let me see what's going on with the team here. Keep those thumbs up because I'm scanning around there and seeing. Noah, not so much? No, it's bad for you.
We have a EdTech and Equity conference at my institution, but what time were you saying?
2 to 3 p.m. Is there a better time for you?
Eastern time?
Eastern.
Yeah, I'm unfortunately engaged, but if everyone else can make it, I might be able to go back and forth between the two. That's fine if that works best.
Oh, okay. I was gonna also suggest, like, if we did later in the day, does that make it easier for you?
Later in the day is better for me, yes.
Yeah. So I wonder, could you still participate if it was 5 to 6 p.m.? Because then that would be like 2 p.m. Pacific time, right, Noah?
Yeah, the conference is still going on. Oh, Amy can't. But I can try to go back and forth. I don't know what times, like, that's going to be going until 3:30 p.m. Pacific time, but I don't know when my section.
Your thing is. Okay, yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I think what we'll do is we'll then pencil in Tuesday, July 28th, 2 to 3 p.m. I'll send you guys a calendar invite. And of course, I'm recording these things. And so, Noah, you and I will have our own maybe private meeting before or after your event so we can catch up on all of that. If you guys have any questions or thoughts that you want to share with me between now and our next meeting, just email me. And I'm really looking forward to this great, crazy adventure that we're going on. Who knows where it will lead? But I think with this, with the smart and thoughtful people who are gathered here, we're going to have a lot to contribute. So thank you so much for participating, and I'll see you next month. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.